Okay, patrons, so now we are going to be working on the body, and the first thing that I'm going to do is block in all of the shadowed areas. So again, I'm going to be doing this by using the paintbrush and the charcoal powder. So I'm just going to rub some of my 4B pencil onto my sketch pad just to create the charcoal powder that we can use. Okay. So I'm going to go and get my paintbrush, put a load on there, and we're going to start with the darkest areas. So they've already been sketched out, so I know exactly where they need to be. As I've said all through the series, make sure your sketch is really accurate. So I'm just going in with the darkest areas first. So put a bit more charcoal in the darkest parts. So again, we are starting off nice and carefully. We'll build up the coverage slowly over time. Also blocking in where the collar is. So look at which direction the fur is going in. And just following that, that's the way that I'm doing my brush strokes with the direction that the fur will be going in. Okay, so I'm still building up the shadows on the body. Like when we did the face, at this stage I'm not worried about getting in all of the individual fur strokes. I'm just worried about getting in the structure so that we know where all of the different clumps of fur are going in, which direction they're going in I mean, and we can just tell where the highlights need to be as well. And then we can worry about rendering all of the individual fur strokes and getting that fur texture in a minute. So like I said in the other parts, it doesn't matter which paintbrush you're using. Just try a few different ones, see which one you find easiest, or you can use different types of paintbrushes depending on what parts you're doing. So for light kind of glazes of charcoal, you can use like larger fluffy brushes if you want to cover like skin or really add a light layer to certain areas. And then to do more controlled work like this, you can use a flatter brush with a bit more kind of control to it that gives you stronger charcoal coverage. This is great for that. I need to make a bit more charcoal powder. So I'm also going to add a base layer to everywhere else. Just get a bit of charcoal powder on even the lightest areas over here. So just get this base layer down. I'm also going to go in with the fluffy brush. I'm going to put lots of charcoal on that and just use that to get this base tone down. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my 2B charcoal pencil and I'm just going to outline the collar. So I'm just going to use this to create the basic shape that the collar is, because I've lost the initial sketch. So I'm just going to try and freehand it in. Really going to concentrate whilst I do this part. Doesn't have to be perfect. So just adding in where the metal clip bit would go. Okay, so now I'm just going to fill it in with the 2B pencil. Going to shade in the whole area. The collar's really dark. Going to do the same up here. Okay, I'm also going to use some of this charcoal powder to darken up the shadowed areas. Add some shadow around the collar as well. I'm also going to add this bit of colour up here. So I'm blowing off the excess. I'm going to blend the charcoal to reveal some lighter areas in the collar. When you blend with the stump, it does lighten up certain areas. So I'm just going to add some of the darkest shadowed fur with the 2B pencil as well. Just this really dark patch and the dark patches up here. Just where it's really, really dark. And also this part here. So I'm also using this stump to shade out the pencil that I just added. Soften out these areas and blend out the pencil marks. I'm also going to use it to add some of the shadow, so to darken up certain areas, add some shading. So I'm just using this stump to get in some shadows, the fur direction. So I'm just finishing off getting the shadows blocked in, and then we can go in and add all of the highlighted areas and just create that fur texture again. I just want to make sure that I've got all of these shadows established. Okay, so I've added all of the shadows that I want to. Now I know where all of the clumps of fur need to be. I know where all the shadows are, so I'm happy with that. So now we can go in and we can go and add in all of the highlights. I'm just going to take a quick break, eat dinner, and then I'll be back and yeah, we'll do all of the fur texture. So I will see you in a bit. Bye guys. Okay, so now I'm going back in with my eraser and I'm going to use that to create all of the fur texture. So what I'm going to do is start nearer to the top and work my way around. So I'm just going to do the exact same technique as before. So I did cut off the end of my eraser and I'm just going to create the little fur marks. I'm looking at the direction that this fur is going in. So as you can see, this area of fur is going in a much different direction than the area of fur on top that we did first. So that's why it's important to keep looking at the direction that the fur is going in. This fur is a bit longer, so we can get away with doing these longer fur marks. So you can use varying degrees of pressure to get the different kind of brightnesses of highlight. Press harder if you want them brighter to lift more of the charcoal off. If you want to just lift a bit of the charcoal off, then just barely touch the eraser to the actual paper. So I'm going really slow when I'm doing this. There's no need to rush. It's quite a quick process anyway. It's not as long-winded as, say, using coloured pencils. So remember, it doesn't matter if things go a bit too light because we can make them darker in a minute if we need to. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with this side. So the fur is much longer, so you can do these longer fur strokes. It will also help to kind of distinguish which areas are the shorter fur and which are the longer fur if you kind of vary your fur strokes, the length of them and stuff like that. Make sure you're paying attention to the direction that this fur is going in though. So work on each of the individual clumps separately. So treat each new kind of area as a new clump so that you're looking at all the different directions. So remember, this is okay. Remember how kind of defined the fur before looked when we just did this sort of stage with the face. It will look very defined at the moment, and that's okay. Also going to highlight this metal part on the collar. So I'm still just working my way around. Not really doing anything differently. Try to overlap the fur just so it doesn't look so uniformed and straggly. Okay, get in there with it. Also, make sure that you get rid of all of the little bits of eraser. I just use this large fluffy brush and just wipe away all of these extra little bits. They will start to build up and can kind of cloud your vision of the fur that you're trying to render. Remember, it doesn't matter if areas look too bright and too defined. Okay. So because this eraser is getting a bit too short, I'm just going to switch over and use the same eraser but just another one of them. Just because it was getting a bit too hard to hold. So I'm just going to go and continue to do the rest of the fur. So I'm just going to do it in silence and just get the rest completed, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now that I've added kind of the fur texture to the whole area, what I'm going to be doing now is just making it less distinct, less defined. It looks very kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it basically doesn't look smooth. It's very kind of contrasty. There's lots of really light highlights and then just really dark areas, and it's just very obvious where each individual fur mark is, which is not what we want. So like before, I'm just going to take the tissue and we're just going to go and soften the whole area by blending it out. So go over the whole area with the tissue. It will lighten up the dark areas and it will darken up the highlighted strands of hair, but you'll still see the fur texture underneath. So this is a great method to use. It will give you the fur texture you want, but not the horrible contrastiness. And then you can always go and darken up certain strands and lighten up certain areas again if you need to. Okay. So now that I've softened it out, I'm going to go back in with the eraser, chop off the end again, create that new sort of defined edge. And now I'm just going to again go in, add some more of the fur texture to the brightest areas, and also just pull out the highlights on the highlighted contours and kind of the sections that need to be highlighted and need to be lighter. I'm just going to lighten them up. So you can use the widest kind of part of the eraser if you need to erase a large area. So doing this in layers also helps to add depth. So you'll have some fur texture that's more subtle, and then you can have these brighter highlighted strands on top, and it will just help add a bit more sort of depth to the artwork, to the drawing, make it look a bit more realistic. So just pull up the strands on the lightest areas. So again, I'm going to chop off the end. Just do this whenever you feel like you're not getting that kind of easy defined highlight again. So again, if you find that you've done a bit too many, they've become a bit too defined again, then you can just go in again with your tissue and again just lightly soften it into everywhere else. That's probably what I'll be doing in a minute. So if you do go wrong, it's very easy to go and fix it. Okay, so just go in with the tissue again. Soften, soften, soften. Okay. So now we're going to use that extra hard charcoal pencil to add in all of the shadowed areas. So I'm first going to work over here, and I'm going to use it to define these darkest shadows and also just integrate them into the fur around them. So I'm just using small little fur strokes to darken up these shadows. I'm also adding kind of details in the fur, so like in this clump of fur there's some little darker sections. So I'm making sure that I'm looking at the reference photo and finding all of these little distinguishing kind of features. This is something that you really want to do if you're doing a commission as well. So keep looking at your reference photo. I know I keep saying it, but it is so important. You can just become very into what you're doing and just get into the groove of doing it, and then you'll realize that you haven't been looking at your reference photo and something has gone wrong. So just keep glancing at it every few sort of seconds just to make sure you're still on the same path. It's really important, especially when you're trying to do something very photorealistic. You know, if you don't just want to be realistic, you want it to be photorealistic, you've got to always be looking at your reference photo to make sure that you're doing, like, it's accurate to what your reference photo looks like. So I keep looking at areas that I've already rendered just to see if I need to change something. You'll often notice things that you didn't notice before, which is what I do quite a lot. I'll think something's just how it needs to look, and then I will notice something that needs to be slightly changed about it. And that's okay, that's good. That's, you know, there will be things that you don't spot, so it's always important just to keep checking all the time. And even coming back to it the next day, there'll be certain things that you'll notice then, or just a few hours after. That's why it's important to take regular breaks. I always advise that you take regular breaks, because if you don't, you'll tend to get impatient and you'll want to rush through it because you'll be getting tired. You'll find it hard to concentrate, so you're more likely just to want to power through it and rush everything. So take a little break, you know, every hour or two, or even shorter, you know, every half an hour. Just take a few minutes, have something to eat, have a drink, or just watch something, or just chill, read something for a bit, and then come back to it, and you'll be relaxed and awake again, so you can, you know, you'll be ready to take a more patient outlook, like look over everything, if that makes sense. So I'm still just working on making these look a bit softer in terms of transitions. Obviously we will blending out these shadows. They are a bit drastic at the moment. But I just want to, again, like with the highlights, just get all of the shadows in place and then we will soften them out later on. I'm also going to go in with the 2B now just to add in the even darker shadows. Just these really dark parts. Okay, so now that I've done that, we need to blend them out. We need to soften them out a bit, so I'm just going to go in with the stump that we used before. Just soften out these shadows. Okay, also going to use the tissue to blend it out. Blend, blend, blend. Okay, and then just one last time, we're going to pull out these main highlights. So I'm just finally making sure these highlights, where the area is highlighted that needs to be highlighted, add the shine to the fur. Okay, so it's looking really good at the moment. I'm just looking around to see what else I want to do to it, see what else needs to be kind of tweaked and adjusted. Just making this area brighter. Just going to add a bit of shadow. So I'm still just adjusting these highlights. Some areas I want to be a bit brighter. Remember, it's the contrast which is going to make your piece look realistic. So you want to get a really accurate contrast for it to be as realistic as it possibly could be. Okay. So I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to just look at what I want to adjust, see what kind of jumps to mind that needs tweaking, and then I'll be back just to finish it off and finalize everything. Before I go, we're just going to darken up this tongue because I can tell that needs to be darker. And just go over it with this tissue. And then okay, one thing that I do know that I need to do is add in the whiskers. So, like I said, we didn't darken up all of this area because I knew that I needed to get the whiskers in. So I'm going to do that now. Again, I want a really kind of clean cut on this, so I just chopped the end off, and what I'm going to do is just add in all of the whiskers. I'm going to be really careful when I do this, so I'm going to be really patient and really focus on what I'm doing. I'm not going to worry about getting them exactly like the reference photo. I'm just going to look at the direction that they're going in and also the amount of them and just try and replicate that. They don't need to be exactly like the reference photo. They just need to be close. So I'm also adding these little kind of parts where the whiskers come out from. So I'm darkening up this area to add in them. So I'm just darkening up the center of these like pores where the whiskers are coming out of. And soften them out with the stamp. So now I'm just defining, thickening up these whiskers now that I've got them all blocked in. Okay. So I'm going to leave it there for now for this part, and then in the next part all we're going to be doing is we're just going to be looking at the whole of the drawing and seeing what areas we need to lighten up or darken and refine, just to make sure that the contrast is as accurate as it could be, to make the drawing pop as much as it can possibly, pop. So that's it for this part, and I will see you in the last part. Bye guys.